Nothing compares to when I became Catholic. I'm being totally honest. I did it because I was pregnant with our first child. It's almost like chills come over my body. Every time you pray the Lord's Prayer, you should say it in a way that you're just feeling it.
As somebody who's been Catholic my whole life, I can't really imagine switching from one religion to another. In fact, I hear all of these stories and it seems like no two stories are the same. And we have two very different conversion stories for you. The first one is Melynda Ludwick. She's the First Lady at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. Her story is honest, it's inspiring, and I love how she connects the Eucharist and the Lord's Prayer in a great way of reflecting on them toward the end.
I grew up as a non-denominational Christian, and we just attended a country church. And when we celebrated communion, as it was called, and we did that maybe once a month, it was always, this is a symbol of my body and my blood. And while that's beautiful, nothing compares to when I became Catholic. And I'm not even sure I got the training I should have gotten when I went through RCIA about the Eucharist. But soon after that, to understand that that is the true presence and that is Christ's body and his blood, we are so blessed to be able to have that joy every time we experience the Mass. And I just feel like it's a cup that overflows, that you can't get enough of it. That I actually, when I take Jesus's body into my hands and I ingest, it's almost like chills come over my body. Like it's kind of hard to explain, but it's such joy that I feel so fresh and new and so close to him.
When we hear stories like this, we can kind of feel like a switch was flipped, but that's not always the case. And Mrs. Ludwick talks about how she didn't necessarily hit the ground running when she converted.
When I converted to Catholicism, I'm being totally honest, I did it because I was pregnant with our first child and I wanted us to go to church together, and I didn't have all the knowledge. I just thought it felt like the right thing to do, and I did it. And I went through the motions for a while because I'm not even sure I was taught, like I said, in RCIA. I'm sure I was, but it didn't sink in. And it was later, like a few years into my faith and the children growing up a little bit, that I met some mothers, and our children were in Catholic school, and I became really good friends with some other mothers, and I was really able to grow my faith at that point. I really felt the love of Jesus in the other Catholics around me. Sometimes people keep their faith inside to themselves and don't share. And this group of mothers really just let me in and let me share the love of Jesus with each one of them. And I believe that's when I really understood the difference and understood the difference between my Protestant faith and the Catholic Church. And I continued to learn through those years. But when the other women showed me that much love, I began really to see the love of Christ in the Catholic Church and in the love of Christ in the Eucharist.
So it was community that really changed things for her. And author and speaker Jim Rohn famously said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." Let's ignore for a second that he ended his sentence with a preposition. We can easily forget what's going on or become complacent. So it's important that we reflect on what's really happening.
It's kind of like the Lord's Prayer. I had a friend who was a priest one time say that every time you pray the Lord's Prayer, you should say it in a way that you're just feeling it. And I really try to do that. So each piece of the Lord's Prayer, as you know, on earth as it is in heaven, I visualize earth and I visualize heaven. And the same thing with the Eucharist. I think when we, at least for me, when I take the Eucharist, I try to envision that as Jesus' body and that Jesus' blood. And that is just so for me personally, overwhelming, that if you can visualize that in your mind, it will just go to your heart, and it'll just fill you with joy.
This is such a great reminder / challenge for me. I've tried to do this in the past, and I'm definitely going to be doing it in the future. At Mass, at adoration, at the tabernacle, to visualize Jesus present, heck, inside of myself after I receive Jesus in the Eucharist. To picture that is such a great reminder. I love it. But we have another conversion story in our next episode that has a different twist to it. So until then, thanks for joining us.